One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to krystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. So you've gone through all the steps it takes to create an amazing podcast. But now you're wondering, what are the best podcast marketing tools? And I totally understand this curiosity, because you're thinking, okay, I've poured my blood and my sweat and my tears and my time into creating this thing, but what good is it if only 2 people hear my awesome message? You've worked so hard creating your podcast, but how do you get it out into the world? That's what we're talking about today. I want to share with you the 5 best podcast marketing tools. So let's jump right in. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Krystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Because if you've been thinking about creating a podcast for a while, well, I'm so glad you found this show. Think of this as the shortcut / time-saving version of searching Google and YouTube for hours and hours trying to figure out the world of podcasting. Trust me, as a busy mama of 3, I get it. You don't have a lot of time to be spent, or wasted, I should say, searching the web, trying to find all the right ideas and all the amazing things that are out there, and you just end up overwhelmed. Trust me, I've been there, done that, took home the souvenir. But this podcast is going to help you in practical ways, because twice a week we'll be delivering episodes that are going to give you steps to help you create a podcast your audience can't wait to listen to. So let's get right to it, shall we? Holy moly. This podcasting stuff is so overwhelming. I don't even understand. Like, you have to pick out equipment, and then you have to decide on a name, and then you have to say, am I going to have guests? Am I not going to have guests? Like, what am I, like, just all the questions, right? I totally get it. This is exactly where I started when I first started podcasting. I had all of the exact same questions, and I to be perfectly honest, was overwhelmed. Totally overwhelmed with what I was doing. So I don't want you to feel that way. I've actually created a page specifically dedicated for people that want to start, launch, and market their podcast. It's at krystalprofit.com/start here. And there you're going to find our 3-step framework for you to start, launch, and market your podcast. Everything is in one place, and you can find all of the details for how you can create your podcast this year. So ditch the overwhelm and let's get after it. Let's do this thing together. Again, that's krystalprofit.com/start here. And be sure to grab all of the amazing freebies while you're there, including the quick and dirty video. You'll see what I'm talking about when you get there. Okay, so like I said at the beginning, there are 5 areas of podcast marketing that I want to specifically talk about today. And the goal is to help you analyze these strategies and see how they fall into your overall marketing plan. So I'm just going to list them out and then we're going to dive deeper into each one of them. So the first one is video sound bites, or these are often called audiograms. The second is social media. The third is your email list. Fourth is your word of mouth. And fifth is the size of your interview guests' audience. So if you don't already have a marketing plan in place for your podcast, then use this episode as a guideline to build one for existing and future episodes. Because even if you've never done any marketing up to this point, other than you put it out there and you say, hey guys, there's a brand new podcast, like use this episode as the structure in order to build a solid marketing plan and say, okay, this is definitely going to work for my podcast and my audience, and some of these things may not. So take what you can and what applies to you and your audience, because you know them best after all, and then just roll with it. Try some things out and see what happens. But let's dive into each of these individually and work on how you can use them to your advantage. So the first one is video sound bites, or like I said, these are often called audiograms. And you may have seen these on platforms where you follow some of your favorite podcasts, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook. I know I see a lot of these in Insta stories. I see some of my favorite podcasts. They post these audiogram like clips. And these are great tools to use to show little snippets of a podcast episode. And the ones that I see are usually about 30 seconds or less. But you can definitely make them a lot longer if you'd like. But a few shows include several segments at one time to show off a longer portion of the episode. You see these a lot, like I said, in Instagram stories. But what information should be included in one of these video sound bites? So this can range across the spectrum from show to show. Like some people will say, oh, I have this very famous celebrity that's going to be on this episode. And then some people can say, hey, I'm name dropping. Obviously, I don't say I'm name dropping, but they say, hey, I'm going to have this person on my show. You should really listen because they're super popular. They're celebrity, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Like those people, those podcasts. Yeah, you get it. But some people include a hook. This entices audiences to figure out, what are they talking about? Or is that something that, I'm really going to be interested in? So a specific example of this episode is the episode I did with Janine, she was a fabulous interviewee, and she's our friend from Germany. So shout out Janine. That was such an awesome episode. But within that episode, she talks about being held at gunpoint. And I'm like, holy moly, like I've got to include that, because you don't hear that every day when you're talking to someone about, on female entrepreneurism. They don't typically bring up, a situation where they're held at gunpoint. It's like, yeah, like crazy story. But I used that soundbite from the episode to grab my audience's attention, because I knew that would be something that would stand out from all the other noise that is online. But you could also use the soundbites to focus in on one of the important questions you have during the interview. So if there's a common theme in your audience or a frequently asked question that you're answering in this episode, I say this, I'm talking about your episode, within your episode that you created, then if you kind of tease that content, your listeners are going to be interested to find out what the answer is to that specific question. You could even have your interview guest like talking about this really interesting story and then cut off like it's a cliffhanger, right? People are going to be like, oh, well, what did she say? What was the rest of it about? Like they just want to know. But it goes back to really knowing and understanding your audience. What do they want to hear and how do they want their information delivered to them, in what kind of way? So where are these created? I use my hosting site, buzzsprout.com. And their online platform has this amazing feature built directly into their website. And I don't have to use a third-party company because Buzzsprout just allows me to do the sound bites right within the episode portal, which is pretty amazing. And they just updated this feature. I'm actually working on creating a video tutorial that shows you step-by-step on how to do this because it's really cool, and I'm totally geeking out on how much fun it's going to be to see how the new one is because it's so awesome. But if you use a different hosting site, you don't use Buzzsprout for your podcast, then you can use another program like Headliner. And I've done a few tutorials using Headliner. I've used them in the past, and it's really cool. I like to kind of play around with different platforms and different ways, like the templates, to see which is going to make my life easier. And I got to be really honest, I had never used any other platform really before, and probably like 2 or 3 months ago, I'd only used Buzzsprout, but I'm pretty impressed with Headliner, and I really like that you can add in, your logo, and you can do your brand colors. And so I really like that. It's a good second choice to Buzzsprout. If you don't have them for your hosting site, you can definitely go to Headliner. And when you go to the show notes for episode 62, you can find all of this information there. I even have some sample video bites to show you what I'm talking about. Video sound bites to show you what I'm talking about. That way you know exactly what it is that I'm saying. So that's number one, is video sound bites or audiograms. It's a great way to market your podcast. Number two, and I would say this is probably the obvious one, is social media. And I'm a little biased when it comes to social media. So if you're looking to get all of the marketing strategies for every single platform out there, you may have to go to someone else, because I primarily focus my marketing efforts on Facebook and Instagram. And there's a reason for this, because that's where my audience hangs out. I'm not looking to figure out Snapchat and Twitter and be on LinkedIn, like all these places all the time. Like, I picked 2 platforms that I know and I understand, and I realized that's where my audience hangs out. So that's where I'm going to spend the majority of my efforts. So with that being said, let me tell you the things that have worked for me and the things that have not. So I used to add the sound bites to my Facebook page every Friday whenever I was going to release a new episode the next Tuesday. These were my sneak peek episodes. And this has been like one of the best podcast marketing tools that I've used, was the sound bites for posting the sneak peeks, because people would see, oh, hey, like there's something new coming up. Or, there's a new guest, or, oh, that's an article I really want to see, or they recognize someone that was going to be on the podcast and they were really excited about the show coming up. So now I don't do these prior to an episode being released, because now I release on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So for these, I release my my graphics and my videos, all of that, the day that an episode goes live. So like I said, it's totally up to you on using what works for your podcast and your audience. But I know other podcasters that release clips on the day of their show, anytime something's released. But this is something that I've done from the beginning, and now this new way works for me too. So I know either way, it totally works. But you, do whatever's going to work for you, because I'm just always looking to test and try other new marketing tools and strategies. So within social media, I kind of like layered down even more, but I want to focus on posting graphics and your episode description from your hosting site. So all of the information that's uploaded to iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, etc. plays a vital role in your podcast. And if you didn't know this, you don't have to do this every week or every single time you upload an episode. All of that goes to your hosting site, but that information is displayed on all of those platforms where people can see it. So instead of rewriting that same text over and over and over again on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever, I use the copy from my podcast description on social media. This is like one of my little hacks behind the scenes. I literally copy and paste that exact information from my hosting site, and I put it on Facebook on Tuesdays, and I put it on Instagram anytime a new episode is released, because why am I going to reinvent the wheel when I've already spent some time? And this is where, I've talked about my course previously, but in the podcast course, I really tell my students, like, if you concentrate and plan out all of this stuff ahead of time, you don't have to put in so much effort down the road when it comes to actually marketing your podcast. So that's a little quick side note for you. But when it comes to Instagram, I like to post about a new podcast episode in my news feed, and then I'll either put a soundbite or a graphic with like a short quotable from the guest, and then I add that directly into my Insta stories from my feed. So I know my current audience likes to know what's coming up on the show and what we're chatting about, but I also like the consistency of it. So I keep showing up on social media in some form or fashion every single week talking about a new podcast episode. So like I said from the beginning, there's many different ways that you can do this, but I just wanted to give you what I've seen that's worked for me and what my audience really responds to. Okay, so that was number 2, which was social media. And then number 3 is email list. So do you already have an email list? Do you know why it's important to have an email list? Well, I can't get into all of the details of email lists today, but I believe you should have one. It's important to have a way to access your audience without social media, especially since not too long ago, Instagram and Facebook, do you all remember that? It kind of just went rogue for an entire day, and everybody absolutely lost their minds. Everybody was going bananas because they did not have Instagram and they could not access Facebook. I remember I was freaking out too. I was like, oh my God, the sky is falling. What is happening? And everyone was totally freaking out. And then, less than 24 hours later, everybody that preaches about email lists was like, see, this is exactly what we're talking about. This is why you need an email list. So I'm totally on that train of thought too. You definitely need to have an email list. But how do you share your podcast with your email list? So that's a great question that I've heard lots of people asking online. And there are a few ways to do this, but one of my favorite is to share the link of a new episode in the PS of my weekly newsletter. So what am I talking about? Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? The old school, you write a love letter to someone or to your best friend and you're like, P.S. I love you. Oh my gosh, that just reminded me of that movie. You know what I'm talking about? Gerard Butler and Hilary Swank. Isn't that what it was? P.S. I love you. Oh my gosh, that's such a good movie. That movie makes me cry. I can't even, yeah. Oh my gosh, that is such a good movie. Anyway, sorry, I digress. But we publish a new episode every Tuesday and Thursday. And I send out my weekly newsletter every Friday. So I don't send out a new email to my email list every time an episode airs because I don't like to email my list more than once a week. I think it's overkill because I can put everything into one email. I think my audience appreciates that. But for those of you without an email list, I wanted to just kind of touch on a newsletter refers to emailing everyone that is in your database on your email list at least once a week. So that's what I'm talking about when I say newsletter. So instead of sending them multiple emails throughout the week, I send them one. And I mention new podcast episodes or new blog post or Facebook Lives that I've done or a webinar or whatever. Any of those things go in the PS of my weekly newsletter. And you can either link directly to your website if you upload your podcast episodes there, or you can link directly to iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever your audience, wherever they listen. But if you wanted to, another way to market your podcast to your email list is to send an email the day a brand new episode airs. So if you only publish an episode once a week, this strategy can work really well for you. So someone who does this amazingly is Amy Porterfield with her podcast, the Online Marketing Made Easy podcast. And you should totally go join her newsletter too, because she's amazing in so many different ways. I could have an entire episode about how much I fangirl over Amy Porterfield, but that's for another day. But in her newsletter, she shares a specific part of the episode she knows will just totally hook you in, and just like, she knows, like, she's such a good marketer. She knows it's going to draw like your attention, and you're going to be like, well, what's next? Like, what happened? Or she shares a personal aha moment that she had, or a takeaway from learning what her guest had to share. But she doesn't limit her podcast to only interviews. She also does solo episodes, and y'all, like, just all of them are absolutely amazing. But anyway, when she sends out her weekly newsletter, she includes the new information for the podcast and links directly to her website. So from there, you listen to the podcast episode and download whatever freebie she's offering. And y'all, she offers the best freebies, and you can click on any of the additional resources that are related to the podcast. So there are many ways to do this, but I highly, highly, highly recommend that you start an email list immediately. So here's an extra bonus tip. Have a call to action within your podcast episodes. So get people to join your email list through your podcast. This doesn't mean you have to say, hey, go join my newsletter, because, I mean, you can if you want, but I'd love to see you create an offer or a lead magnet or a freebie, whatever you want to call it, that's directly related to your podcast topic. Like, share that valuable information that you have so that people want to join your email list. So for example, I advertise on this podcast my lead magnet for 500 plus podcast ideas for any industry. And I've used a clip within the show that tells people exactly where they can go grab this workbook so they never run out of podcast ideas. And you can do the exact same thing with your lead magnet. So, by the way, if you haven't grabbed it, your free copy of 500 plus podcast ideas, you can find it at krystalprofit.com/500 podcast ideas. You see what I did there? That's just a simple call to action, and that's what it is. And it's a freebie that helps you think of podcast ideas. It's literally 500. I think it's like 540. I counted one time. I did like the auto count, and I saw, so it is a ton of ideas. Okay, so that was the first 3 marketing tools that I have. And then the fourth one is, I said in the beginning, it's word of mouth, but it's actually the elevator pitch. And I'm not going to lie, it's a little awkward when you first start your podcast. At least it totally was for me, because I was still figuring out what my show was about, what it meant to me, what my guests, like who they were going to be on the show, and what people wanted to hear. And really, I wasn't thinking, is this one of the best podcast marketing tools I can use? No, I was too worried about saying something stupid or sounding like I had no idea what I was talking about. Like those were my biggest concerns when I first started. So the elevator pitch is something that took me several months to really nail down. So when I was asked, well, what is your podcast about? I probably did look stupid. I kind of stumbled over my words. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for anybody. So instead, I encourage you to craft an amazing elevator pitch before you ever start marketing yourself. So your elevator pitch needs to be refined over and over and over and over again. And you'll get better at this as time goes on and the more that you practice. But if you're struggling to come up with an elevator pitch, start by asking yourself these questions, answering them, and then writing down those answers. So if you're driving or you're running or whatever it is that you're doing, like, hit pause and, type these out, or go to the website, go to krystalprofit.com/episode 62 and check out these show notes, because that's where the questions will be. But these are the most asked questions that I get about my podcast. So number 1 is, what's your podcast about?
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
You have to know this one. You have to know this one in a short and concise, like one sentence, not a, well, sometimes we talk about this and some, nope. Because if that's what it is, then your show isn't clear enough. You need to have such a clear focus. So mine is, I teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market podcast. Boom, done. And it took a long time to get there, y'all. I'm not saying that just kind of like, oh, what is my elevator pitch? No, it did not come that easy to me. So I really want you to think about it. So the first question, what's your podcast about? The next one is, who is it for? So in that first sentence, like you just heard it, it's for entrepreneurs. Your show, it may be the specific type of person. It could just be for mothers. It could be for, if you're a life coach, it could be someone transitioning in between careers. If you're a nutritionist, it could be someone, looking to be in the best health of their life. Like you just need to know exactly who your podcast is for. So that's the second question. Who's it for? The third question is, what is its purpose? So you need to know the purpose of your podcast. Is it to entertain? Is it to educate? Is it to inform? Or is it just for sheer fun? You need to know that, and you need to tell people that too, because based on how you structure your podcast is how your audience is going to respond. So if you're just kind of loosey-goosey, like there's no real format or anything like that to your show, some people like that. But for someone that's looking for like, I want to go listen to a podcast that's going to give me very specific answers to my specific questions, then your fun, loosey-goosey podcast isn't going to do well for them. So you need to know, like, what is my purpose? For example, mine is to educate and inform people on how they can have the best podcast. Okay, so that is the third question is what is your podcast's purpose? And then the fourth one is, what makes your podcast stand out from all the rest? What makes it different? What makes it special? What is a reason people should listen to you and your message? So for me, I believe that I'm different because I'm a female entrepreneur in this space making it happen. And I'm not trying to be anybody different or be anybody else. I'm just trying to show up as myself. And people have really been responding to that because, y'all, I'm a little goofy. I'm a little country. Y'all know I'm a Texas girl. Like, I show up as myself, and I'm very honest with y'all on, y'all know I'm cheap. If you've been listening for a while, I'm cheap. If you've seen my videos on, the acoustic panels in my office, y'all, like, I just don't, I'm a mom. Like, it's just, all these things make my show unique because no one else has the same qualities as me. So I want to show up as authentically as I can, and then hopefully people will connect with my journey and my story. So the best way to start practicing your elevator pitch is just to start talking to people and tell them that you have a podcast. Tell your friends and your family what you're doing. Get on social media and shout it from the rooftops. Tell people that you're creating a podcast. Let them know what it's about, who it's for, and what makes it different. Because don't underestimate the elevator pitch. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book for a reason, because it works. But I do want to give you a quick word of warning. Like, don't bombard people or be that annoying person like in a Facebook group or something that can't stop talking about themselves in their podcast. Instead, be the person that adds value to a situation and is on a mission to help other people. Like, add value, 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 value. That's what you want to do every single time. So number 5 of my best podcast marketing tools is the size of your guest's audience. So I don't want this to sound like a slimy kind of thing, But interviewing a guest that has a significant amount of influence online can be one of the best podcast marketing tools that you have in your toolkit. But with that being said, I don't want you to go prey on every influencer or person with a huge following. That is not the way to do this. Like, please don't be that person trying to get them to come onto your podcast sounding desperate. Nobody likes desperate, let's be honest. What you should focus on instead is this question. Does my guest have an online presence at all? Because this is a prerequisite to any of the guests that come on the Profit Podcast. You don't have to have a huge following by any means, but you have to have an online presence somewhere, because I want my audience to go find you. I want them to go along this journey with you. So you need to have an online presence of some sort so my audience can continue to follow you on your journey. And they can't do that if you don't have some sort of online presence. So when you do find one who has a large following and they're excited to come onto your show, then capitalize on their ability to reach more people through their audience. Make your marketing really, really awesome. So maybe even collaborate with them and get a picture of the two of you together, or use their picture and create an awesome soundbite. Create something that'll be exciting. They'll just be like, man, I can't wait to share this with my audience. The likelihood of your guests sharing it and their audience responding to it is a lot greater when you make it fun. Because remember, marketing is supposed to be fun, y'all. Like, all of this stuff, you've worked so hard and you want to see your podcast succeed, but if you don't take the time to plan out a marketing strategy, it's not going to happen. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it is not going to happen. So those are the 5 best podcast marketing tools that I have to share with you today, and I'm going to run through them again really quickly. So that's number 1, video sound bites and audiograms. Number 2, using social media to your advantage. Number 3, your email list. Number 4, word of mouth or your elevator pitch. Number 5 is your guest audience size and their online presence. And like I said, all of these are some of the best podcast marketing tools to help you get started, but don't feel like you have to do them all. If you already have a marketing plan, then just add the tools to your existing tips and strategies. If you don't have a marketing plan, then start doing some of these things immediately to promote your podcast. But like I said, you don't have to do them all. And don't forget to measure your success along the way. Are your sound bites getting a lot of engagement and attention? Is your social media strategy working well for you? Then if so, which platform is performing the best? Do people click on your podcast link whenever you put it into your email list? Is your elevator pitch resonating with your potential listeners? Did you have an explosive number of downloads from a guest audience? Pay attention to all of these things along the way. That way you can measure your results and potentially duplicate them so you continue to have success in the future. But I want to make sure you find a way to measure the success of your strategies along the way, because only then can you tell what's really working and what's not. But that does it for this episode. So if this is your first time tuning in, I'd love for you to subscribe to the show and hear what other fun things we'll be talking about in the coming weeks. Be sure to grab the 500 plus podcast ideas download and check out the other great resources we have in the resource library. But also check out the show notes at krystalprofit.com/episode 62. And remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Krystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous, or If you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Krystal a text message, and I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of fan mail shout outs.